Welcome again, everyone, to a webinar on how to help families claim the 2021 expanded child tax credit. We actually have 4 people presenting today. Julia Beebe with the Coalition on Human Needs and myself. I lead the Partnership for America's Children. We'll take you through the bulk of it, but I want to kick us off with introductions from 2 of our sponsors. Kelly Murphy from the Children's Action Alliance in Arizona is going to talk about why this is important for Arizona children. And I think all of you know that the Children's Action Alliance is the leading multi-issue child advocacy group in Arizona. They also host an organization that does budget advocacy in Arizona, and blanking on its exact name, and I apologize for that. They are one of the members of the Partnership for America's Children, and frankly, one of our best organizations. After Kelly, I'm going to turn it over for a moment for a few words from Ilana Lowry. Ilana is the Arizona Director of Common Sense Media, which is a San Francisco-based nonprofit that's actually works nationally, that studies how media and technology affect children. As one of the leading nonprofits dedicated to improving the lives of children and families, they find this issue about helping families claim the child tax credit to be particularly important for children and families, and especially so in low-income communities in states such as Arizona. So Kelly, if you want to speak first.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kelly Murphy. I'm the Vice President of Policy at Children's Action Alliance. Thank you for that introduction. Children's Action Alliance has been in Arizona for almost 35 years now. We're a policy and advocacy organization, primarily on the Children's Action Alliance side, working on obviously children's issues. So everything from early childhood, child welfare, juvenile justice, children's health, K-12 education, you name it. We work on that in Arizona. The other half of our house, if you will, is the Arizona Center for Economic Progress. They primarily work, they're one of our co-sponsors here today as well, and they primarily work on tax and budget issues, but also social safety net issues, affordable housing, SNAP, food insecurity, all of those kinds of issues. And we are happy to be here today trying to help link those of you who work with families in the community, because we do not, with ways that they can claim their expanded child tax credit. It's important. Obviously, the COVID relief funding that came out last year definitely pulled a lot of children out of poverty for families when they claimed their child tax credit, and helped families stay above water during a very difficult time. And we believe that there may be as many as 62,000 children in the state of Arizona who are missing out on that credit for a multitude of reasons, because their parents didn't make enough to file a tax return, so they didn't, or there was some other barrier to them doing so. In some cases, they filed but didn't get the full tax credit return. There are just a multitude of reasons why families might be in that situation. And we want to make sure that everyone who's entitled to it can get it. And so that's why we are here today. And I'll let the folks who know a lot more about how you can go about doing that talk to you about that. But that's why it's important to us at Children's Action Alliance and the Arizona Center. I think it's very important to help families in this way. So welcome, and we're happy to have you here.
Ilana.
Hi, my name is Elena Lowry, and I am the Arizona Director for Common Sense Media, which most parents know us for our ratings and reviews for all media for kids. And that's really how we started. We are a national organization that is closing in on its 20th year. We've been in Arizona since late 2018, but we have several arms of the organization. In addition to Common Sense Media, which is, as I said, how most people know us, we also have Common Sense Education, which is our award-winning, digital citizenship curriculum that's in 70,000 schools across the country. But the reason that I'm on the call today, well, for lots of reasons, but one is for Common Sense Kids Action, which is our advocacy arm of Common Sense. And we partner with policymakers, business leaders, other advocates like Kelly and those from CAA to really make sure that kids have the opportunity to succeed in whatever ways that looks like. And in this particular case, lifting them out of poverty and having them be able to lead the best possible lives that they can is why we're involved in this issue and in others that would allow families to have those opportunities to succeed, to be lifted out of poverty, et cetera. So we identify solutions not only for the digital well-being for children, but also to champion legislation that supports the youngest and the most vulnerable kids across the country. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Debbie, and the partnership. I look forward to hearing the presentation, and Common Sense is always here to help support in any way we possibly can. So feel free to reach out to me if you want to do that.
Great, thank you both so much. So the Coalition on Human Needs, next slide, please. The Coalition on Human Needs is an alliance of national groups, service providers, faith groups, policy experts, labor, civil rights, other advocates that work at the federal level to advance the needs of people with low incomes and increase knowledge of positive outcomes in programs. And of course, the child tax credit, as we'll talk about in a minute, is one of the programs with really very strong positive outcomes. And they are partnering with my organization, the Partnership for America's Children, next slide, please, which has over 50 members that are multi-issue child advocacy organizations in 40 states. As I said, the Children's Action Alliance is one of them. And our mission is to support our network of state and community child advocacy organizations in their work. We've partnered on an effort to help service providers and state agencies around the country educate families about their eligibility to get the child tax credit. Because what we've seen is that although most people got it automatically, a lot of families did not get it and need to take action to get it and don't know that. And we conducted focus groups that both showed us what messages were helpful to get families to claim the credit and told us that some of the people they trusted most to give them information about it were state agencies such as schools or, the SNAP program administrators or WIC programs, and also community organizations that serve them. So child care providers and, other human service organizations, which, many of you come from. So you're the people they will listen to, and we want to help you tell them that they're eligible and how to claim it and make it as easy, as low cost, as simple for you as we can. Next slide, please. So what is the expanded child tax credit? The American Rescue Plan back in the spring of 2021 created the child tax credit, which we'd had for a number of years, just for tax year 2021. It may down the road get expanded for other years, but right now that's the only tax year it's for. That tax credit was expanded in 3 ways, and the result of that expansion, if we can get everybody to claim it, is projected to reduce the number of children living in poverty by about 40%. At least as important, it's projected to take over 1 million children out of deep poverty, and so that even though they'll still be poor, they'll be a lot closer to the poverty line and above half the poverty line. And we know that those are the kids who really have the most life-changing outcomes from this kind of infusion of resources. Next slide, please. The tax credit got expanded in basically 3 ways. The first way, and this is the part that most people have heard about, is that families could get half the credit in advance in monthly payments in 2021, and the second half when they file their taxes for 2021 in this tax season right now. Families that didn't get the tax credit in 2021 can get the full credit now by filing their tax return. So that's the first expansion, and that got a lot of public attention. Less public attention was paid to the fact that the size of the credit was significantly increased. So instead of being $2,000 per child, it's $3,600 for children under age 5 and $3,000 for a child age 6 through 17, So it nearly doubles the value of the credit for young children. And the third way that it expanded the credit is probably the least understood. There no longer is a minimum income requirement, which means that families that have no earned income at all are eligible to get the first credit, the full credit. And as a companion to that, it's fully refundable. So even if they don't owe a penny in taxes, the money gets paid back to them as a tax refund. Who are these families? They might be families where they were unemployed all year because of the pandemic, but they also might be disabled parents living on Social Security or elderly grandparents living on Social Security and raising their grandchildren. There are a number of reasons that families don't have earned income, and those families in the past could not get the credit, and they tend to assume that they still are not eligible. But for 2021, they are, and they need to learn that. It's a lot of money at stake for these families. A family that has 3 children in it, one 4-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 15-year-old, could get nearly $10,000 just for the child tax credit. In addition, if they file for a full tax return, there are other credits that they may also get. As I'll explain in a moment, the families that didn't get the advanced child tax credit also probably didn't get the economic stimulus payments, and they should be able to get at least the third one, which is another several $1,000s, depending on the size of the household. If they did have some earnings, but not enough to require them to file for taxes, they may also get an earned income tax credit, or they might possibly get a child independent care tax credit. So it's pretty easy for a family with 2 or 3 children to end up getting closer to $20,000, which is an enormous amount and really makes a big difference in people's lives. Next slide, please. So here's our challenge. There's 4 million or more children that are at risk of missing out on the child tax credit payments nationwide. Those are families that had either no or low incomes, or their income was not from earnings, it was from something like Social Security. And so they weren't required to file taxes and didn't file taxes in 2019 or 2020. They also didn't claim their economic stimulus payment. And as a result, the IRS didn't know where they lived, or that they had children in them, or that they were in their households, or that they were eligible for this credit. So while most families got the credit automatically, these families had to tell the IRS who they were, where they lived, how to make a payment to them, and that they had children. And the way for them to do that now is by filing their taxes. This is also an issue of equity. Even before the 2021 expansion, Black and Latinx kids were disproportionately excluded from the child tax credit, and now they are more likely to miss out on it unless we help them claim it. As I told you, we conducted focus group research that tells us that trusted community organizations and state agencies can help families claim the child tax credit. And I want to be very clear that you do not have to be a tax expert to do this. Your role is to tell them that they really are eligible and to connect them with the tax experts that will help them file their taxes. Next slide, please. So who's eligible and how do they claim it? The people who are eligible, the children must have Social Security numbers, which pretty much means they have to have been born in this country. The adults can either have a Social Security number or something called an ITIN, or individual taxpayer identification number. So they don't necessarily have to be documented so long as the children are documented. They also have to have a close biological or adoptive relationship to the child. So the child has to either be, for the taxpayer, their child, their grandchild, their stepchild, a younger sibling, a step sibling, a half sibling, or the descendants of any of those people. Or it could be a foster child that was placed with them by a government agency. The child also has to have lived with the adult in the US for more than half the year, unless they're a baby that was born in the second half of 2021, and they can't have supported themselves. That's it. That's the requirements. They don't have to have earned income. All of the other things that people tend to think of around taxes don't apply. This is what they need to do to get the credit. Next slide, please. As I said, most families automatically got half of it in advance in 2021, but families had to take steps. Basically, they had to go on to an online website to claim it. And most families that were eligible to use that website did not. But everybody, regardless of whether they got the first half of the credit or not, has to file a tax return this year to get the second half of the credit or the full amount if they didn't get any of it last year. And as I said, most families who didn't get the credit don't understand that they are eligible and why they should file or how to get help filing. Next slide. So I want to walk you through the timeline on this, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Julia, who's going to take you through the tools that we've prepared to make it really easy for you to do this work. As you know, tax filing season began in January, so we're about a month in, and your local volunteer income tax assistance sites have opened. Those are sites where low-income people can go to get free help filing their tax returns, just as middle-income people might hire a tax preparer like H&R Block or someone like that. You can connect them to that, and Julia will tell you how. People who are required to file either have to have filed their tax returns by April 18th or requested an extension. And the cutoff line is for heads of households. It's a little over $12,000. At that point, you're required to file a tax return if you have more than $12,000 in earned income. Married couples, it's double that. So a lot of people haven't filed taxes because they're not legally required to. People who didn't file tax returns or aren't legally required to don't have to worry about that April 18th deadline. They can file a tax return at any time throughout 2021. And so we encourage you to think about continuing this work not only through April 18th, but beyond. It's also true that people who are required to file can ask for an automatic extension. And if they didn't ask for an automatic extension, there's only a penalty if they owed money. But the people we're trying to reach are going to get money back, so they don't even have a penalty. So it's really worth continuing your outreach work well past April 18th. That's important because in May, we are expecting what's called a simplified online filing portal to open up. And that's a website run by an organization called Code for America that's doing it in partnership with the IRS, where people who weren't required to file a tax return can claim their child tax credit and probably that third economic stimulus payment as well, using very little information and documentation. It's a really easy way because they don't have to file a full tax return and they can still get the credit. And that portal will be open through very late fall of 2022. We don't know exactly when it'll close. It might be October, it might be November, but that leaves lots of time for you to try to help families claim this credit. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julia, who's going to talk to you about what we've tried to do to make it easy for you to help these families.
Thanks, Deb, and hi, everyone. If you have any questions as we're presenting, please do put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. We can go to the next slide, please. So as Deb mentioned, there are a number of options for free tax filing assistance. And as we said earlier, you don't have to be a tax expert to support families in claiming this credit and potentially other credits. And so you can identify a local VITA site for people you're helping using this Get Your Refund link, and we'll send out all of these resources to those who've registered after. So don't feel anxious about capturing it all right now. But when you go there, you'll be able to put in a zip code and note the different locations, the languages that are available, if you have to make an appointment, and their hours. We really recommend calling in advance. Most sites, I was told by partners in Arizona, do have capacity, at least in English and Spanish, and may have access to a phone interpreter. But if you'll need an additional language, it's really good to call in advance and make sure that that's lined up. And also, I just recommend calling and confirming any details about what time you should arrive, appointments, before sending someone to one of these sites. And our partners, our VITA partners in the state, also wanted to just emphasize what Deb already mentioned, which is that those who don't have to file by April 18th, they can also, in addition to potentially using the online portal, if they want to file a full tax return to potentially claim all the credits to which they're entitled, there are a number of VITA sites open in the state past that April 18th deadline, and they're able to support people in filing their returns. My understanding is that some of these might close after April 18th and reopen in June, but they'll be open then throughout 2022 to support them. And then beyond the in-person sites, there are other options for folks who want support filing their taxes. Again, at Get Your Refund, which is available in English and in Spanish, there are several other options. One is that you can access free do-it-yourself tax filing services. And I know the different VITA sites, different agencies that have VITA sites in Arizona can also give access to people to a unique URL where they can use the TaxSlayer filing software. So whether you go through Get Your Refund or go directly through a local VITA site, they'll be able to provide you with that filing software. There's also an option to get virtual tax filing assistance. So again, this would be good for folks who feel comfortable uploading documents online, but do need some support, and they will have the option to get support over the phone. And then finally, if someone can't make it through the full filing return process, or they've decided they don't want to, they can go and Get Your Refund and sign up to be notified when Get CTC, which is the simplified filing portal, opens come May. And just to note, for the do-it-yourself tax filing services, whether you're doing that through emailing a local VITA site for that link or through Get Your Refund, the income limit there is 73,000. So you have to have earned less than that to access that software. And I did just want to note from our partners in Arizona, although I know all over, that VITA sites are really in need of volunteers. So if any of you are really eager to volunteer at these sites in the future, please reach out and we can put you in touch. And I know that there have been situations where people are not maybe forgetting about their appointments or not showing up, and there's a need to also have volunteers who help call and remind people about their appointments. And that's something that volunteers can be plugged into right away. So if there are folks on this call, in addition to helping families claim this credit, who want to support with VITA, please do reach out and we'll put our contact information. And then, perfect, we're on the next slide. Another option for tax support and free tax assistance is through the low-income taxpayer clinics. And so these are places that can support if someone has some type of tax dispute with the IRS, perhaps, for example, around a situation when a partner, an ex-partner, has claimed children that are actually living with them. So if someone does have a situation, they're already in a dispute with the IRS, we recommend going to this locator and finding a local low-income taxpayer clinic. And again, really emphasize calling in advance to make sure that they can support your client or your member with their particular situation. And we can go to the next slide, please. So Deb mentioned that while children need Social Security numbers to be eligible for this, that the adults claiming them can file either with a Social Security number or these individual taxpayer identification numbers. And if they haven't yet obtained an ITIN or they need to renew theirs, they'll have to submit what's called the Form W-7, along with proof of identity and foreign status documents. And in our toolkit, we actually have a fact sheet about this and a lot more information. So we won't go in too deeply right now, but really encourage you to reach out if you have questions and to check out our toolkit. Generally, to get an ITIN, it's a two-step process where you prepare your application and your documents, and then you have to actually submit that application with a tax return. You can mail in your documents, but we really don't recommend that because this process can take many weeks and even months at this point, and we know people don't want to be away from their personal documents for that long. And so we've put here a few resources where you can get support certifying your copies, including the IRS Taxpayer Assistance Centers and certifying acceptance agents. For certifying acceptance agents, I just want to note, while there's not actually payment for this process, they might charge money. And so it's really important to confirm that before using their services. And a final note is that Get Your Refund has recently added an option. So when you go in to Get Your Refund, if someone's using Get Your Refund services, they can actually indicate that they want to apply for an ITIN, and they'll be directed to local VITA sites that have been trained to help them complete that Form W-7. Next slide, please. Here we have the required documents in English and Spanish that someone will need. One way that all of you can support individuals in filing their taxes is actually providing them with this checklist and answering any questions they have about kind of collecting these documents. We know that people have a lot going on and we don't want them to have to go to a VITA site for an appointment, show up without all their documents and have to return 2 or 3 times. And so we really encourage people to go through this list and where possible for you all to support individuals in doing so, so they show up prepared. Next slide, please. And I do see a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll make sure to get to those after. And now I just want to go through a little bit about outreach and resources available to make that easy. As Deb mentioned, we identified both through our focus groups with those who don't file kind of regularly and service providers, as well as the ongoing outreach we're doing and partners are doing, a number of really common questions and concerns. And we've done our best to really incorporate those questions in our materials, in our FAQs, and we are updating at least the FAQ kind of in real time. So if there are questions that you have, we really encourage you to go there, and there's a table of contents that can help you navigate it. Next slide, please. So there are different levels of outreach, including kind of raising awareness and then deeper engagement. I think we can go to the next slide. And so I just wanted to go through some of these and note that everything you're seeing here is included in the toolkit that we'll send out in the registration. And so we hope that this has been as easy as possible. You can just take these materials, copy and paste them, adapt them as you want, but you don't have to recreate them. One of the ways that we know is really effective to get families this information and actually taking action to claim these credits, including the child tax credit, is sending a mass text messages. That's really sort of the form we've seen to be most effective, but also recording robocalls and or sending emails. And you'll all know sort of the best ways to communicate with families in your agency or in your network. And so this is a sample from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. And we also have text message samples, robocall scripts, email scripts, and I believe 11 languages in our toolkit. And so we hope that agencies and organizations can just take these and use them immediately. Next slide, please. Oh, and one thing I should have said on that past slide is that we also know that we found that when organizations and agencies send messages, not once, but 2 or 3 times, every time actually brings more people to services to help them file taxes, and that there's evidence that people really go back to these messages and reference them later, especially as they draw closer to different deadlines. So all of that to say, we really encourage not just sending one message, but also sending follow-up messages as possible. We also have in our toolkit information to record a phone hold message if you're at a school or an agency where there's a hold line, and this can also be used in kind of waiting rooms and on office screens. Next message, please. Next slide. And we have a number of different posters and flyers that can be sent home in kids' backpacks or in different resource toolkits, whether that's virtually or printing them out. We have these in English, Spanish, and I believe up to 15 different languages. And that includes both flyers like this one on the left, where it points people to get your refund, but also customizable flyers if you want to put your local agency logo, and if you know there's a local VITA site you want to point people to. Next slide, please. We also encourage groups where possible to add child tax credit related questions to existing intake forms and intake processes, and then adding flyers and FAQs to any resources that are going out. So if you have a place where you kind of have a resource library or resource toolkits, really encourage you to include whatever you think would be relevant to the families you work with that you can find in our toolkit. Next slide, please. Deb mentioned earlier that we know that trusted messengers can really get the word out to families about this. And we know that this has been really effective when schools and school districts and public benefits agencies have sent this information through mass communications to beneficiaries and families. And so many of you might have relationships with local or state benefits agencies or with whole school districts or individual schools. And where possible, we really encourage you to reach out to the representatives there that you know and encourage them to work with you to send out these messages. And again, the good thing is that these messages are ready to go for them. We actually have an entire toolkit dedicated for public benefits agencies, and in our resource toolkit, you can link to that one. And so if you do encounter a school or an agency that says, yeah, we're willing to do this, but just tell us what to say. Fortunately, we do have those messages in multiple languages, and they can go ahead and use whatever communication system they have. Next slide, please. Our toolkit has information for newsletters and social media. Social media alone isn't often enough to really move people to take action, but used in combination with another kind of other forms of communication, it can be really powerful. Next slide, please. And then we know that there are some groups, maybe you're already doing this, or you are interested in doing this, but want to do a little extra as well. And for those of you who want that, there are other ways you can kind of take that next step. If you can hold a phone bank or conduct peer-to-peer texting. So this might be a way of reaching out to people in your program who are more likely to miss out on this benefit or more likely to benefit from the credit. You can actually kind of send a mass communication to everyone and then do more directed follow-up with those individuals. You can also host a Q&A. We know people might have questions about this process if they're not familiar, and that could include a tax specialist or an immigration attorney or another subject matter expert. And that can be obviously in person, online, whatever works for your audience. And if you're interested in hosting that and sort of trying to navigate who best to have on that call as far as subject matter experts, we're happy to be in touch about that as well. Next slide, please. And then a number of ways that you can help individuals actually with the tax filing, whether that's helping them schedule VITA appointments, maybe supporting with language interpretation in the actual scheduling, or working to make local tax site services as accessible as possible, whether that's through interpretation or childcare, transportation. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really critical that people show up with the tax documents they'll need for themselves and their families. And so having events or making staff available to support clients and members with this can be incredibly supportive. Next slide, please. And so this is just an example of various things we have in our toolkit, including all of the materials I just showed, the focus group findings that Deb mentioned, and other best practices. And so we'll make sure to share out, this is a bit.ly, but we'll also send that out in the follow-up email. Next slide, please. And we have here as well a listserv. I don't know, I can try to, I'll put, once I stop talking, actually put this link in the chat, but we have a number of new resources and trainings coming up throughout the tax season and beyond. And so if you, kind of the best place to learn about those is through our email listserv, where we usually send an email about once a week. And so please do sign up, and then you can find out about everything that's going on related to the child tax credit and to outreach in the coming months. And then finally, before we wrap up and turn to questions, I just wanted to note that there are ways to track the impact of the communications and outreach you're doing, at least in part. And so through Get Your Refund, you can actually create a unique URL. And so that would be Get Your Refund / and then whatever you wanted it to be, maybe the name of your organization or initials for your agency. And so that allows you to see if you send out text messages or hang flyers, anyone who uses that link to get services through Get Your Refund or visits the page. It obviously won't tell you who that is, but it can tell you if 5 people have done it or 500 people have done it. And so if you're interested in really tracking what's effective and maybe what's not, please do reach out to me and I'm happy to help you request that URL. I think we can go to the next slide. I think I'll kind of explain about the sign up after, but I think we had a quick poll that Deb and Zoe were going to lead us through.
Yeah, so if Zoe could put the poll up, we have a couple of questions for you that will help us help you. And I'm going to ask you all to just take a moment and respond to it. There's 2 questions. make sure you respond to both of them, and then we'll get Zoe to share the results. Obviously, Julia's shown you a wealth of materials, and we don't um, anticipate that any one organization is going to use all of them. So we want to understand um, which resources are the most helpful and what we might be missing out on, which I'm going to ask you about in the chat in a moment. But let's get your answers to the poll first. We still have people responding, so I'm going to give it a moment. Yeah, it looks like everybody's responded. So Zoe, if you could share the results so that they can all see them. I hopefully you can all see them now. It looks like about a third of the people on the call already have been engaging in outreach and awareness on this. And we have at least one organization that was already planning to start and 3 that will now consider starting. And then about a third of the people on the call aren't planning it. I hope that you will think about it and maybe go back and figure out what pieces you can easily use. And then when we look at the resources, it looks like the flyers are by far the most useful item for you, with the posters and the social media posts also being very useful. So that's really helpful for us to know. And I do want to let you know that we do expect to have more resources over time, particularly as that online portal opens up. So we do encourage you to sign up to get new announcements, and we'll also come back to our sponsors here in Arizona to ask them to either host a quick follow-up webinar once the portal is up or just share the additional resources. I also want to ask you to pop in the chat any resources that are not here that you would like to have. And if you would find it helpful to get an individual appointment with either Julia or her colleague Alini, so that you can think about how to implement this in your own organization, because we are available to provide additional support if that will help you do it. So I'm going to give you all a moment to put that in the chat. And then we have an inquiry from somebody on the webinar that I want to follow up with. Sandra, yes, we can share the full link. I think we can share it in the chat now, right, Julia? And we can certainly send it out with the registration resources. I know that bit.lys occasionally are problematic, and so not all organizations use them, but they're certainly convenient compared to the full link.
Yeah,
So,
I'm putting the non-bit.ly versions in there, and someone did ask in a Q&A. I think we answered this, but we will be sending the slide deck with the links as well. So certainly great to capture this now, but you'll get it after.
okay. So I'm not seeing any responses to my question, but we have a question in the chat from, I think that's Corporal Gonzalez with the National Guard. And he's really interested in knowing who's on the call. Are you community action agencies? Are you from the Greater Phoenix Urban League? VitaSite coordinators in Phoenix? He'd like to know who's listening to this. I think because that lets him know how these messages are going to reach young soldiers in the National Guard. So if you guys could just drop into the chat what organizations you're with, that would be great. And then we'll go to the questions that are in, I think we thought we had a question in the Q&A, but maybe I missaw. So let's see, we've got a VITA provider, Southwest Human Development, a VITA coordinator. I'm not sure what AFFCF is. Do you know, Kelly? CASA, I think, is the organizations that represent kids in legal proceedings, but I guess AFFCF is a CASA provider. A behavioral health organization.
We have one here, the Easter Seals Blake Foundation, work with family and child services in Yuma County in the Q&A.
Oh, great. And we've still looking at the answers. We've got at least one parent educator in the and a home visiting program. So we've got a legal services program. Oh, we've got the Arizona Friends of Foster Children Association. That's great. I should tell you that we have a fact sheet about foster parents' eligibility for the credits, which is being cleaned up right now and will be added to the toolkit in the next couple of days. So hopefully that answers the question. And then the question in the
I think in the
Q&A.
Q&A it was about just answering that question, then if we would have slides available.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was somebody saying that they're an organization that works with Child and Family Services in Yuma County. So I'm going to mark that as answered. Do we
Yeah, does
have,
anyone have any other questions that they want to, it's a great set of groups on the call. If people have questions, we'll give it another minute. If folks want to answer in the Q&A or in the chat.
yeah, I do want to mention one thing that Julia didn't. If you're helping families schedule a VitaSite appointment and it's a married couple and they're going to file a tax return together, make sure that they can both go to the appointment because they're both going to have to sign the papers. So that's just one little thing to know. Yeah, the foster parent fact sheet is just a quick fact sheet that explains that when foster parents can claim a child tax credit on behalf of the foster parent, it actually addresses foster parents' eligibility for the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, the child independent care tax credit, and it also talks about eligibility of other people who are caring for children who are connected in some way to the child welfare system. So adoptive parents, families who are in what I have sometimes seen as informal or kin care foster parents can still claim that child so long as they've got that family relationship that we mentioned at the start of the call. And so that's going to be a really useful tool for anybody that works with foster parents to be able to just pull it out. I should also mention that it talks a little bit about the eligibility of when people can't claim these credits, they can sometimes claim a $500 non-refundable dependent credit, and it talks about that. We've been holding it up because I was trying to get an answer out of the IRS about legal guardians who are not foster parents, where the child wasn't placed as a result of a foster process. And we didn't get that. So we're just going to put the fact sheet out and we'll update it when we get the legal answer on the guardians. So that fact sheet should be going into the toolkit sometime in the next few days. And it'll just automatically be updated. So if you look at the toolkit and it's not there, just go back again in a couple of days. And that's really, bookmark the toolkit or make sure you know how to get to it, because we'll be adding new resources to it as they become available. And actually, the child independent care credit for 2021, I believe, is refundable for the first time. It was increased and it was made refundable. So you're absolutely right, Jim, on the past. But that's actually a great example of why we're hoping that you will all help educate families about these credits, because there really were significant changes. And people who tried to claim them in 2017 or 2019 and thought they couldn't get it need to be told that it's different and they can get the credits now. They just assume that, for example, a disabled parent assumes that because they were never eligible for the credit before, they can't get it in 2021, and that is not possible. I see a question in there that the toolkit has a section for foster parents. It may be that our colleague Alini actually got it in the toolkit already.
I think that final, we're still waiting on that one pager you were mentioning, Deb, and you'll see a set of other materials that are already available there to answer John's question. As the resource Deb mentioned is available in any others, you can just check back and they'll all be under that subtitle.
Right. And Jim's absolutely right. Most of the families we're trying to reach think of themselves as non-filers, as people without a tax filing requirement. And they need to understand that even though that first of all, because they weren't required, and many of them legitimately were not required to, they're not at risk for being told that they were supposed to file or that they owe back taxes. If they made less than about $12,000 as a single parent or head of household, or less than about 25,000 as a married couple, it's fine that they didn't file. They may not actually know that, but just because they didn't file, they still can file and they still can claim the credit. We do have one person on the phone line, and I can't tell if they're, I'm going to let that person, I've unmuted you, the person on the phone line, or I've tried to, so that you can ask a question if you want, since you don't have access to the chat. You may need to unmute at your end. I think if you hit *6 or *7, that should do it, but I won't swear to it.
And Jim also put that also they should file to protect their identity. VITA will do it for free. And I know Jim runs many VITA sites, and I know you have a lot of expertise in this area, Jim, as well as I think some videos on this. So if you want to put those in the chat as well, those might be helpful, or send them along and we can share those out after through the email.
In fact, Jim, do you want us to unmute you, or for you to unmute yourself and to talk a little bit about this protecting identity part? Because that's new to me, and that sounds like a really good additional reason.
Yeah, it's an excellent reason. There's so much fraud going on, and if somebody gets your social security number, they can just go make up W-2s and everything else and file. Here's a simple thing and the easiest thing. They'll say they work for themselves, right? And create a Schedule C with just about the right amount of income to maximize the earned income credit, file a return under your social security number, and you never even know it until you go to file and you find out that somebody's used your social security number. So it's just best to protect it. I would encourage people to get used to filing a return. And second, even more important, we just saw over the last 2 years where if you filed a return and they've got you on file and maybe bank account information, if there's ever these stimulus payments or things like that, boom, it's a lot easier than getting checks or debit cards or whatever. Lots of reasons to just file a return.
So, Jim, just to clarify, what protects their identity? The filing itself, or does VITA do it a different way?
Well, no, we file it, and sometimes in VITA, what you have to do is if they really don't have any income, you've got to kind of make up like $2 of income so that they can e-file the return. But how does it protect their identity is if somebody got hold of their social security card or number, or even just made it up and it happened to be your number, right? And they file a return, and then, you know, it gets discovered and they start trying to go after that person, they're going to come after you. You know, they think it's you, not them. So that's how it protects your identity.
So the filing itself is what protects the identity.
Correct. Because once you file a return under a social security number, if somebody tries to do it again, it gets automatically rejected.
Got it. That's really helpful, and that's something that we'll make sure other people know. I do want to just point out that the people who didn't get the credit in 2021, the advanced credit, are people who knew that the economic stimulus payment was out there, because that got really widespread attention, and they still didn't claim it. So your ability to be trusted to say to them, you really are eligible for this, you can do it, it's not that big a deal, and connect them with the tax filers like Jim is a big help. And these are people who know the money's out there and it's a lot of money for them, but they just either assume that it's not available for them, or that it's going to be too burdensome, or they don't know where to get help. And that's where you as trusted organizations can play a critical role. So I'm not seeing any other questions here. I want to ask Kelly and Ilana if they have any final comments before we wrap this up.
No, just thank you for the information. I think it's very helpful. I know the recording and all the information is going to go out to everyone who participated and to those who registered who maybe for some reason didn't make it here today. And then I believe Debbie mentioned this earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again. We'll probably do something else CAA and this group of sponsors. We'll probably do something else a couple months down the line. So stay tuned for that. And share it with your friends and other folks that you know that work in this space, because we're happy to reach out to them too. We want to just get the word out to as many people as possible. So thanks for attending, and I'll see if and Alana has anything she wants to add there.
No, I think you said it all, Kelly. Thanks to everybody for attending. Sorry, my dog is here in the background too. But I think there's such great information here that could be shared. So I'll just say ditto and say that I can help where I can, and feel free to reach out to. Sorry about that. We also have a puppy who has a very loud bark.
So, John Keene is asking for Jim Simpson's contact info. Jim, if you're comfortable with us sending it to him, we can send it to him after the webinar. You can just put a note in the chat. Yes, Jim says yes, so we can follow up on that. And I do want to just note it that Jim put in the chat that some VITA sites will have year-round services in case people miss the filing deadline. And that's, as we said, people can file year-round. People who didn't have a filing obligation, it's not even late. A lot of people ask for extensions, and people who didn't owe money and fail to ask for an extension, there's no penalty. So please do think about doing this work over, the whole of this year. There's a lot of different opportunities, and we're going to be putting out resources to help you think about things like the end of school or the start of summer feeding programs, where a lot of the kids are whose families could claim this credit and probably haven't, or even the start of school in the fall. You may not be able to do it between now and April 18th, but there's still a lot of ways to help the families you work with. So I just wanted to say that. And Julia, did you have any last words?
No, thank you all. And I see that Jim just sent some videos as well, and we can include that in the follow-up. So really appreciate this engaged chat conversation, and you'll be getting all of these resources. We really hope that this is just, that this training is either one part in kind of your journey to do outreach around this, or launching it. And we hope to be in touch and really help make this happen. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
And think also about reaching out to the state agencies you work with, like schools and WIC sites. We've seen really significant numbers of families claiming the credit after they got text messages and emails from the schools and providers they work with. So it's a pretty easy and it's essentially a free lift. So think also about that. Have a great day. We appreciate your joining us, and we hope that you can help your families. Turn off the recording now.